Yes. Excellent, Smithers.
Okay. All right. Hey guys, that was my trusty sidekick there. Uh, we'll call him. Oh yeah, that was the cameo. Yes, you were officially in the video, Brandon. Congratulations. You're now famous to King Drew 10th graders who already know you. All right, so we're back at it, guys. Hopefully we can push this out in 25 minutes or so. There won't be any no bells ringing and no students coming to the door, so it's just me and my phone, and you guys can't ask me questions to slow me down either. So, well, you can on Google Classroom after if you really got some. Anyway, all right, so I think the last thing I was talking about was like the early Spanish conquest that was popping off with young Columbus coming in 1492. So he comes in 1492, and he is funded by the Spanish who are just trying to expand their empire and to look for more resources. And supposedly, he's going to claim that there's going to be a lot of gold on the island of Hispaniola, which we now know as the Dominican Republic and Haiti. They're both there side by side. One was colonized by France, one was colonized by Spain. So Spain is therefore going to invest a lot more resources into Christopher Columbus. All right, they're going to experiment with institutions like colonial rule, and they're going to ultimately create a model that's going to work for the rest of the new world. It's going to be called the encomienda system, which basically is kind of like the feudal system that we've seen previously. It's kind of like sharecropping that we're going to see in the future, in which we have a very, very rich person or rich people who control the majority of land, while that land is going to be worked by peasants, or in this case, as we know, slaves, because slavery is rising up very rapidly during this time period. So they're going to try to enslave the natives that they're going to interact with originally, but unfortunately for the Native Americans who they come around, about 90%, maybe even 95% of them are going to lose their lives due to interactions between the smallpox, being overworked, and just being abused by their European visitors or settlers, excuse me. All right. We're also going to see that these encomenderos, the people who control the encomiendas system, are going to pay special taxes to extract precious metals. So they're going to create their own mining system. We'll talk about that in a few pages from now, and we'll go from there. And so as these resources, as they continue to take things from Hispaniola does not have that much gold as Columbus believes it does. So in actuality, most of the gold they find, people have already dug up, and when they're looking for more, they can't find it anymore. So they're going to start to shift and look for more territories as they continue to look for gold and riches. So we're going to see some larger, more complex, and more militarized societies that the Europeans are going to run into. But still, a lot of these Europeans are just so different. The natives haven't seen anything like this ever in their lives. They don't know what's coming at them, and so they're really not prepared. Even though they're a very highly advanced society, they have great military tactics, they can control large areas of land with no issues. When they meet those Europeans, they've never experienced anything like that before, which is going to lead to a lot of their downfall very rapidly. All right, so now we have our Aztec society. The Aztecs are going to gradually unite numerous independent states under a single monarch, along with counselors, military leaders, and priests. So we see that same kind of society that we've seen in other Mesoamerican communities in areas in which we have the formation or the unification of people who lead the military as well as religion and things like that. And so this is going to be a very large empire for the New World. It's going to have about 25 million people that are going to be under the whole entire empire. It's going to be very well irrigated, and it's going to be very, very prosperous for agriculture and things like that. They're going to be highly developed and understand how to make plants grow. And we know that when plants grow and there's a lot of agriculture, there's always a very, very large population that is being supported by that, or one that can grow because they have enough of the stuff. One second. All right, I'm back. Okay. All right, so now we have the Aztec state is going to be based off extensive kinship network with marriages solidifying alliances. So kind of like what we've seen in the European areas with the Habsburgs, and even Isabella and Ferdinand, marriage is going to be the way to go and the way to unify a lot of these areas. So extended kinship is going to be central to statehood. We're going to see lineage of natural rulers. That bloodline is going to make you just naturally going to be a ruler. We have priests also who are going to legitimize these new emperors. So it's kind of like that mandate of heaven, divine right, things like that. We're going to see that same thing happening in Mesoamerican areas where you have to have the gods who are behind you, and if they're not behind you, then the people won't support you. The Aztec Empire is going to spread through conquest and the creation of tributary states. So basically, I conquer you and then you pay me money. Very smart. It's going to bring it wealth, but it also brings it military instability. Let's think about these. Think about this. So if I'm conquering lots of areas, my military is going to be spread out very far. Not just that, there may be lots of uprisings that I have to combat. And my military may also be strong and may not necessarily agree with the leadership style and may also try to overrun the leadership style. So there are numerous issues with trying to be a conqueror, trying to conquer lots of things, and the Aztecs are going to run into it. So the conquests are going to provide a steady stream of humans for sacrifices. So they conquer an area and then just, well, the gods need new people, so let's just kill those new people for sacrifice and sacrament and things like that. So from 1440 onward, the Aztec Empire is going to face constant turmoil, and it's going to be subjected to populations rebelling and the elites rebelling as well. So everyone is going to rebel against the leadership or the government in the Aztec areas, which is going to make it prime and ripe for conquering when they start to interact with Europeans. All right, so now we have Hernan Cortez. Hernan Cortez. So we're going to have a debate. So some people are going to believe that Cortez is, a god sent by, is someone sent by the gods. Other people aren't really sure what he is, so we're kind of unsure on the story of what the Aztecs believed about Cortez. But either way, they didn't treat him as a threat when they first saw him. They treated him as a interesting creature they had never seen because they had never seen people with such pale skin before, or people who were so hairy, or people who were just so destructive. So we're going to see Cortez is going to arrive with 11 ships with 500 men, 16 horses, arms or cannons and things like that, and he's going to become the model conquistador, or conqueror, or things like that. So we're going to see that the Donna Marina, say that right, is going to be the local Indian family that is going to be Cortez's interpreter. And we're going to see his soldiers are going to be very, very impressed with the city structures that are in the Aztec areas because they're not expecting to see fully developed cities. They're not expecting to see lots of different things. But they're also considering these people very primitive because they don't speak the proper languages that the Europeans do. They don't have the same religious structure that they do, so they're not the same on the same level. They're more primitive, and they're more. It's easier to conquer them or to make them do what you want. And so we see the Spanish is going to conquer them because they're going to form alliances with Aztec enemies. That's one thing, which is never a good thing. And then Aztec warfare involved capturing enemies, while the Spanish consisted of killing their enemies. So when the Aztecs capture somebody, they're just going to conquer somebody. They're going to capture them, not kill them off, because they believe in the value of life. The Europeans, on the other hand, are just going to capture you and just kill you off. So a lot of the battles that the Aztecs encountered with the Europeans, they were not prepared for the level of slaughter and the level of abuse that was going to take place. And so the Aztecs also did not know what gunpowder was because gunpowder comes all the way from the Eurasian region, mostly comes from China, but then it came all the way through Europe. And now that it's in South America, now that they're in the Americas, it is not, they had never seen it before. So seeing things blow up and explode and seeing cannons, the Aztecs were completely not prepared for that. They also didn't know about steel, so there's a story that basically Cortez kind of called the Aztecs primitive because they just grabbed the sword and cut their fingers because they didn't know what steel was. They didn't understand how sharp the blade could possibly be, which to the Europeans made them seem primitive, but to the Aztecs they just never seen that technology before. We also see horses and we see war dogs that the Europeans are going to bring into the Americas. And so the Aztecs are going to allow Cortez to come into the areas. So much so that he's going to partner up in a way with Montezuma and going to use Montezuma as a figurehead to basically uh, be a translator to the people and have the people agree with whatever Cortez is doing and saying. It's going to work for a little bit until the people start looking around and just seeing how brutal all the Europeans are, how they're taking over the land, how they're abusing people, how they're killing people, how they're just very destructive. So they're going to rebel, and during this rebellion, Montezuma is going to try to be the voice of reason to the Aztec people. And unfortunately for Montezuma, his people are going to rise up and kill him, and then continue to try to push the Spanish out of their territory. They're going to temporarily succeed until the Europeans come back with more forces, and they're able to then conquer the Aztec region and take over. But by that point, Montezuma is dead, and a lot of their cultures and structures and things like that have been destroyed. And their people are also dying because of the interactions with the Europeans. Alright, so as I said previously, we're going to kill Montezuma right here, and we're going to see them withdraw, and they're eventually going to come back and defeat them. So we see that starvation, disease, smallpox, lack of guns and cannons and gunpowder, and Cortez's ability to force the Amerindian alliances led to the Aztec defeat. So we're going to see more of the Aztecs actually die from disease than from fighting, because literally you would just see people falling 3 and 4 days after interacting with the Europeans. They didn't know what smallpox. They had never been exposed to smallpox before, so they didn't have the immunities to smallpox. They didn't have the immunities to a lot of other things, as well as some of the animals coming in were also bringing diseases as well. So Cortez is going to become the governor of New Spain, and Spain is going to learn how to be effective at conquest. They're going to be very swift in moving things. They're going to remove the symbols of legitimate authority, and we're going to have disease as the real advantage. So you'll see later on in the chapter that all of the places that were great capitals for the Americas and the New World, they're going to be taken over completely by the Europeans. And the Europeans are going to knock down these structures. Not just knock down these structures, but they're going to build on top of them. Some of these great spiritual, very, very sacred and prized places are going to be just destroyed and taken over. And that's the real way that they're going to destroy the culture and really just supplant themselves and make themselves the leaders of these areas. Alright, so the Peruvian people, so they're going to be the South American, the Incas, excuse me, they're going to be the South America's greatest empire. We're going to see the domain from present-day Chile to southern Colombia. If you guys have your map, that is going to be a very nice part of land in South America. What's about Alright, so their political power is going to be based on their conquest as well, and their ability to withdraw tributes from people, so more money coming in they don't really have to work for, and they're also going to have commercial exchange that's going to finance their communication and their military network. They're going to have a very, very large agrarian base. They're going to be agricultural based as well, and they're going to have about 6 million people at its peak. And if you guys know that region and that area, it's very, very mountainous. It's incredibly difficult to really have like large populations of people there, especially back then. Not so much now, but 6 million in South America during this time period is going to be a very, very large number. So we're going to have 1532. We're going to have Francisco Pizarro is going to found a divided empire. Let's say he's going to lay a trap and defeat the Incan ruler and the Incas in 1533. So within 1 year, he is going to divide the empire. The European defeat of the New World's 2 greatest empires, the Aztecs and the Incas, is going to introduce a new scale of imperial expansion and provide Europe with great wealth and a market for their products. And we'll see how this action is literally going to transform the world, and to this day still has an impact because it allowed Europe to have a financial head start while it depleted the mineral wealth and the natural resources that a lot of North and South American places had, as well as Africa and parts of Asia later on. So now we have the Columbian Exchange. The Columbian Exchange is going to be that exchange of animals, plants, and people and their products and things like, and diseases and things like that, from the New World to Afro-Eurasia and back home. So some of the things that we're going to see the transformation of environments, because Europeans do not have the same respect for the environment that the native cultures did. They're going to come in and destroy things and really work on mass farming, which is usually very detrimental to areas and regions and things like that. They're going to destroy economies and transform them from bartering systems and trade systems like that to having cash and silver and mineral resources being used to trade. We're also going to see that diet is going to shift majorly, and we still see that anywhere that we have Americanized diets, disease usually follows. So the same thing is going to happen. They're going to move away from their native diets, and they're going to embrace more of those European or those mass-produced products that are going to thrive or feed the economy and move more money, including our cotton, our tobacco, corn, and things like that. So we'll see the new agriculture. Oh, here we go. So with disease, we're going to see smallpox, measles, pneumonic plague, and influenza are going to decimate about 90% of the population. That's kind of a low estimate. Some people believe that 95% of the people who interacted with Europeans eventually lost their lives. So we're seeing large scale of essentially genocide of people who are dying just from interacting with their European settlers. So we see new agricultural exchanges. So the New World is going to bring corn, tomatoes, beans, cacao. Cacao is where we get our chocolate from, peanuts, tobacco, and squash. And from the old world, the New World, so we have the Americas, that's where we're going to get all that wonderful stuff that I just said previously. And the old world, so Europe, we're going to get cattle, swine, horses. And with those come more environmental concerns as well as more disease concerns as well. So it's going to undermine habits of indigenous mammals and birds, because a lot of these animals, I said previously, cattle, swine, horses, they don't have natural predators in South and North America. So they're going to thrive, and as they thrive, they're going to destroy environments. You have sheep and things like that that are going to graze entire landscapes that were formerly full of grass that are going to be completely depleted of that grass. And we're going to see also the deforestation that's happening for sugar plantations. So when you knock down trees, automatically you're destroying the environment. But also when you're only planting and growing one crop, you're pulling out all the resources and nutrients that the soil previously had. And when you're not doing any kind of crop rotation, it just leads to eventually famine, because nothing will grow in that area. All right, and plants and animals took an increasingly European appearance. So basically the domestication of some of these former animals are going to be leaning towards the European domestication versus the native domestication. If you guys have ever seen previous pictures of what corn looks like, corn, as it's been interacting with European settlers, has changed its shape, its texture, its everything. Previous corn or maize was definitely not the same corn that people eat today, or that is used today. And you can see that from that interaction with Europeans, they started to change plants. The same thing with cacao. Cacao in its natural form, quite delicious. We don't do that. We have to make it chocolate, which is a very, very intense process. When you first see cacao, cacao is white, and eventually it turns brown through all the processing that it does. All right, so the Iberian Peninsula, all right. So my geography scholars, the Iberian Peninsula, we should all know where the Iberian Peninsula is, okay? The Iberian Peninsula currently has two countries there, and it had two countries there back during this time period too. The two countries are going to be Spain and Portugal. So Spain and Portugal are going to be the Iberian Peninsula. The reason why we know that they are going to control the Americas, because if you look at the language that these two areas speak, they're spoken in the New World. So in North and South America, Spanish is one of the dominant languages. If you go to Brazil, which has the largest population out of all of South American countries, they speak Portuguese. So that tells you right there, the Iberian empires were controlling the New World, at least in the beginning, because they were able to have their languages control the New World as well. So they're going to control large amounts of territory and eventually entire land masses. So most of North and South America are going to be completely controlled by the Spanish and the Portuguese. So we have the Spanish children who are going to live in the towns of the former empire. So basically all the gigantic cities that I was telling you about that the Incas and the Aztecs previously had are going to be knocked down and destroyed and then taken over by the Spanish, so they can really establish their dominance and their empires in these areas. The Portuguese are going to create more dispersed settlements in Brazil. One of the reasons why is Brazil is very, very large, lots of natives there, but they're going to try to force some of these natives to work for them, and it's not going to work too well. excuse me, because the natives are going to fight back. So they're going to either fight back or they're going to run. And so that's going to cause the Portuguese to kind of just stay on their beachside communities and not really travel inland because they're pretty afraid of what might happen if they go in there with the native Brazilians who were there. So at least for that time period, the natives were winning and kind of fighting back against the Portuguese and kind of keeping them and kind of keeping them in certain areas away from the mainland. Okay. Other thing also that's going to happen. So not only are we going to see the Spanish come in and take over people's territories, knock down their cities, we're also going to see Spanish type architecture thriving in these areas. One way that we can see that, even in California, Spanish architecture is very prevalent and it's all over the place. You guys just kind of look around. Also, the Spanish economy, the native economy is going to transform away from what it previously was into more silver-based trading and things like that, as well as family life too. So the Portuguese that previously they were trying to force the native Brazilians into working for them, but unfortunately they were not with it and were fighting back. So the Portuguese are going to stay on the beachside communities and extract Brazil wood. Brazil wood is where you get dye. It's just a really, really pretty wood too, if you've ever seen it before. And then you have sugar as well from the coastal enclaves that are going to come. So here's our map. We can see a lot of the areas that are controlled by the Aztecs originally. So here are the Aztec controlled regions. Wait, all right. Let's look at closer. More clear map. Nope. Take that back. Up here we have the original Aztec region, and then all the parts that are like this color red, we can see right here, are going to be the ones that are under Spanish control. We go to the blue side, we can see all the ones that were under Portuguese control, which is a lot of modern day Brazil. You can see how large and vast that area is. And once again, because of all the mountain structures along the coast of South America, that prevents or stops a lot of large populations from building and things like that. All right. So let's see what slide we're on now. Slide number 21. All right, so we have sugar, slaves, silver, sugar, and slaves. So we're going to see our nice little triangle trade start to pop up, or the Atlantic trade, whatever you like to call that system. All right, so we have silver is going to enable Spain and Portugal to enter established trade networks in Asia. So previously they didn't have enough money to really hang with the big boys, and the big boys are going to include India and Ming, China. So by getting all this silver, they're able to finally join that trading system because they have enough silver to join in with the Asian trade networks. So slave trading is going to subsidize shipbuilding and new insurance schemes, and it's going to make sugar cultivation more profitable. So once again, they're going to try to use the native slaves, but it's just not really happening. So they're going to start bringing in African slaves. As they start to bring in African slaves, it's a very, very brutal system. Lots of abuse. They're not feeding people enough to really sustain the amount of work they're doing. They're living in squalor. They're living in very, very horrible conditions. The majority of these slaves are going to be men during this time period. But it's really, really a very, very horrible system. But it's very profitable for the Spanish empires and for the Portuguese empire. So we have the European conquerors are going to take precious metals from Mexico and the Andes Mountains in 20 years. So in that 20 years, they're going to accumulate more gold and silver than they've accumulated in the past century. Not just that, by them sprinkling a few of these minerals, a few of these jewels, they're going to electrify the area, or the European Afro-Eurasian area, where we're like, oh, diamonds, rubies, sapphires, emeralds? I've never seen those before. It's amazing. All right, so they're also going to have our Spanish mines and our Portuguese mines that are going to pop up, where they're literally going to mine for their own silver. And so they're going to be moving between 25,000 and 35,000 tons of, I think that was tons, I hope it was tons, it was not tons, it's pounds of silver every single year from South America into Europe and Asia, into those markets. And they're going to depend very, very heavily on slaves and coarse Indian labor. Then we're going to have the MITA, or the MITA system, which is going to be a draft essentially for who's going to work in the mines this year. Is it you? Is it you? Maybe it's your sibling, maybe it's your cousin, maybe it's your mother, maybe it's whoever, but people are being drafted to work in the mines. They may not even survive, but they're going to work there. So the wealth from these mines is going to create the local aristocracy. So a lot of these European aristocracies that we have in Portugal and Spain, some of these other areas, are going to be supported completely by slave trade, by silver trade, and things like that. So all of the wealth that a lot of these European nations have developed was created from slavery and stolen from other areas. So we're always calling places poor. We're always calling Africa poor, South America, North America, South America, mineral poor, and things like that. But they would not be if they had had a chance to use their own resources and develop in the same way that European societies had. Because of interaction and context and contact and colonization, their wealth was used to fund European wealth that is still being used today. Also, the mortality rates, like I said previously, lots of death, lots of killing, especially in South America. They weren't really looking to have slaves live and survive. Slaves are expendable. They could just buy new slaves and move on. So we're not really going to see that kind of breeding slavery or the Americanized slavery until we add the U.S. into it. But the early slavery was really just working people until they drop dead, and then continue working them until they drop dead, and then buy new people and work them until they drop dead as well. Because they're bringing in so much money, it's actually worth the cost to just replace the slave. But in America, or in the U.S., because it was so far away from Africa, it wasn't so cost productive to do that. All right, so sugar is going to be the most valuable export from the Americas, and at one point it's going to surpass silver. So we're going to use sugar for everything, and we're going to see how sugar-based diets lead to a lot more diseases as well. And sugar also is going to be one of the main ingredients for molasses. It's the main ingredient for molasses, and we use molasses to make rum, and the Europeans are very, very dependent upon their rum to live. All right, so sugar is one of the major reasons for the growing Atlantic slave trade. Plantations are going to be really small originally, between like 65 to 100 workers, but over time, because they're able to be very, very productive during this time period. But it's going to create a small model for what they're going to do in the empire with the empire. So we're going to see a lot more men, as I said previously, in very, very horrible conditions. All right, the Portuguese and the Spanish are going to carve up South America with the unenforceable Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494. The Portuguese are going to fund abundant and fertile lands for the settlements. So it's all about agriculture and moving these goods and cotton and tobacco and crops and things like that. But also, unlike the Spanish, they're not going to intermarry. So you're going to see the Spanish are going to kind of create a race-based system where if you're pure-blooded European, of course you're number one. But they're going to create these kind of Creole societies where they have their mixed children who are going to be like the number twos in the society. And then if you're native, you're going to be like the third in the society. And that's kind of going to be the system that happens in South America that's still around to this day, where if you have like pure European blood, you kind of see higher in society. If you have mixed blood, you're kind of number two. If you have completely meso or native blood, then you are at the bottom. All right, and so we're going to see that by the 17th century, so the 1600s, they just came in the 14th and the 15th. So within 100 years, we're going to see the population grow to about 300,000 people, 300,000 European settlers coming in, and also reproducing their children, things like that. So when we're not going to find any precious metals in Brazil, the Portuguese are going to just start producing sugar. And some of our largest plantations in the world are going to be found in Brazil. I told you guys previously, but the largest group of Africans outside of Africa is currently today found in Brazil, and all of that is due to slavery. So when the Indian population is going to fight back or flee, the Portuguese are going to import more Africans for slavery. So you have that same kind of caste system that's happening in Brazil to this day as well. Mostly European blood, all the way to the top. If you have mixed blood, not so great. Meso or African blood, you're kind of treated not the best at all. All right, so the beginning of our transatlantic slave trade. The first direct transatlantic slave voyage from Africa to the Americas began in 1525 because of sugar. So sugar is going to be that cash crop that pushes everything. And so we're going to see during this time period, or between 1492 to 1820, we're going to see 5 times as many slaves coming in as Europeans. The slaves are going to be forced, so about 10 million forced people are going to be coming into the Americas, and about 2 million voluntary people are going to be coming in. Quite a disproportionate arrangement of people. So while the Portuguese are going to They're going to start the slave trade. So Portuguese are number one. Always remember that. Portuguese start the slave trade. All European powers, including Spanish, Dutch, English, and French, were all involved in the slave trade at the height during the 16th and 17th centuries. So the 17th and 18th century, excuse me. So the 16th and 1700s. Africa is going to have long-distance slave trading before Europeans arrived. We have those previously. A lot of those Arab and those Muslim merchants are going to have slaves and they're going to use them. But it's going to be a little bit different. And so slaves during this time period are held, but their status is not permanent. And they have the ability to assimilate and be adopted into family society. So if you're a slave during the Arab time, you can be freed. You have the ability to be married, to build up your wealth, to establish yourself. If you're a slave with the Americas, you're just a slave for life. You're probably going to die a slave. You're going to be abused, and you have no chance of ever integrating and becoming equals with anyone that you are enslaved by. So the Atlantic slave trade is going to intensify demand for African labor. Only in parts of East and Southeastern Africa remain untouched. So West Africa, parts of South Africa, North Africa, they're literally snatching millions of people from these areas. The three commerce Atlantic system with African labor, the American mineral and commodity flow to Europe, and the European technology alter the world balance of power. So we'll see all of these things transfer and trade. You guys can also look up the triangle trade. That's another word or reference to the Atlantic system. All right, so the Atlantic system is going to deepen division in Europe. So we have the Habsburgs and their quest for universal empires in Europe. The Habsburg is that family that's going to rule from the 1600s to the 1800s because of their bloodline. They're even going to intermingle with Isabella and Ferdinand's family later on down the line. Let's talk about in the previous chapter. So the Habsburg is going to dominate the Holy Roman Empire since 1273. So not the 14th, so the 1273s all the way to the 1800s, including loose confederations of territories in modern-day Netherlands, Germany, Austria, Belgium, Croatia, and parts of Italy, Poland, and Switzerland. So now we're going to see the Holy Roman Empire is going to have Emperor Charles V control a large amount of the transatlantic empire. However, he's going to split the empire into two in 1556. So we have the Holy Roman Empire that Ferdinand is going to control with Austria, Germany, and the Central European territories. And then we have Philip II is going to reign in Portugal, Spain, Belgium, the Netherlands, Italy, and parts of the New World. And we'll see how religion is going to transform a lot of these areas with the conflict as well, and slave trading and imperialism and things like that. So conflict in Europe and the demise of universal empires. We have rival European powers, the French, the English, and the Dutch threatening the Portuguese and the Spanish. The English crown is going to be sponsored by pirates to seize. It's going to sponsor pirates to seize Spanish cargo in the Atlantic, including the famed Sir Francis Drake. So we'll see. We're going to have empires funding people to steal from the other empires so they can get the riches without having to actually fund an expedition all the way to the New World, because some of these places do not